Well, let's get talking more about those changes. Waiting for us in Moscow is Kirill Dmytriev. He is the chief executive of the $10 billion Russian Direct Investment Fund. And we thank you for your time, sir. The people we've just seen in that report, they're worried about Russia's introduction to the World Trade Organization. They say things are going to get tougher for them, whereas the government says, no, you're just misunderstanding it all. Aren't they entitled to some of those fears about too much competition?
Well, we believe that overall WTO accession will have a very positive impact on Russia, and World Bank estimates that it will lead to 3.3% of additional GDP growth, which is very important right now when the rest of the world is not growing too much. But obviously some sectors will have to become more competitive, and agriculture is one of those sectors, and a bunch of other sectors in Russia will have to be much more competitive as a result. So definitely some industries are worried. Now the government has actually agreed with WTO organization that it will be phasing out those barriers over the period of time to give sufficient time for many industries to become more competitive in Russia. But overall, we believe that WTO accession will have a highly positive impact on the economy, will actually lead long-term to more interesting jobs and actually more jobs as Russian economy becomes more competitive.
Okay, and you keep using that phrase, becoming more competitive. Explain that to me, if you would. What do you think a business in Russia has to do to become more competitive in this environment?
Well, as you know, Russian capitalist economy is only 20 years old, and we believe there is a major leap that Russia can do by becoming more efficient, by increasing labor productivity, by increasing capital productivity in the country. And Russia is already growing pretty well, much better than most of the countries. But really the leap forward will be as a result of better labor and capital productivity in the country, which means new technologies, which means actually, less monopoly in many industries, and to really make Russian enterprises, more efficient.
Can I add something else to that list, really? And I'll put it under the umbrella of business conditions. I think people look at Russia often and they look at some of, say, the high-profile investment stories, the Hermitage Capitals, the BPT&K, things which have gone wrong, to be fair. And they worry about doing business in Russia because from the outside, it looks murky, it looks uncertain.
Well, I think government is very much aware of the need to improve transparency and to decrease bureaucracy in the country, and there are many efforts being taken in that direction. And actually President Putin announced the desire to move Russia from 120th place on ease of doing business to 20th place on ease of doing business. But we also believe that many people in the world do not appreciate some of the positive things about Russia. So you have to really balance it with the fact that, Russia is one of the fastest growing economies in the world right now. It has one of the best macroeconomic numbers right now, including 11% debt to GDP versus over 80% in Europe, and middle class in Russia tripled in the last 5 years. So I think if you balance the opportunity in Russia with some of the negative factors that definitely need to be improved, and the government is very much focused on improving them, I think you actually have a much more balanced and much more accurate picture of the country.
Okay. Tell me more about Russia's exposure to other markets. I guess specifically I'm talking about Europe here, because you've mentioned how this ascension to the WTO could lead to much higher growth over the next 5 years. I wonder if that could be offset by the exposure to what's going on in Europe.
Well, I think we're obviously worried about what's going to happen in Europe, and with Greek possibility of living in Europe quite actually in not such a distant future, really worries about the effects on Russia and on other countries. I think that effects are definitely going to be felt because the slowing down in Europe will lead to sort of low energy prices, which really matter a lot for Russia. But still, Russia has a pretty resilient internal market, which is growing quite fast. And I mentioned middle class tripled in the last 5 years. So I think Russia is actually in much stronger position than Europe because it has much lower debt to GDP ratio. It actually has significant improvement potential and efficiency, and much better growth prospects, because it's very unclear where growth can come from in Europe. But obviously, slowdown in Europe will have negative effects on the Russian economy, and we just need to figure out a way to mitigate that effect.
Okay, so your argument is that the Russian economy is in pretty good shape. I want to look at how it's managed that, and I'm actually going to do it through something you wrote in a Russian Business Daily about 4 years ago. This is for our viewers. It's called The 5 rules for survival. 1, you said don't cherish hopes for a quick recovery. 2, avoid dramatic growth in unemployment. 3, support private enterprise. And then 4, move forward onto new territory. Defending one's current position is not enough. And finally, you said avoid open confrontation, use levers of influence. I mean, when you lay it out like that, it sounds like good common sense. Did Russia employ those sorts of ideas to keep itself in a good position? And I'm particularly thinking probably about the third point. Was it supporting private enterprise? Yeah, because I think that's what people in Europe be crying out for these days.
Yeah, well, thank you for remembering those things. Actually, I think we thought about this 5 years ago, and what was very good for Russia is that it actually kept unemployment very low. And that's very important when you compare this to some of the European countries like Spain and other places where unemployment is very rampant. So supporting private enterprise is very key, and actually Russian Direct Investment Fund, which I run, is created to support that by investing in private enterprises in Russia with the leading investors in the world. So we very much believe that investment into private enterprise is a way to deliver growth. And we believe that cross-border investment from Russia into Europe, from Europe into Russia, and Russia into Middle East, and Middle East into Russia is a way to foster growth where growth is so much needed. So fundamentally, we believe that private enterprise is really the key for success, and proper investment, including proper partnership with co-investment partners like us in Russia, is the way to deliver on that growth in private sector.
All right, very interesting talking to you. Kirill Dmytriev from the Russian Direct Investment Fund there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Camille.